You know, we're living in some pretty dark times right now. It felt like there, at least around where I live, for a couple of months after the vaccines came out, people were chilling out. Folks stopped wearing their masks. I saw almost nobody wearing them. People were acting normally. And then, oh, the box just had to turn up the pressure. CNN had to start crying again. All the folks on TV and the radio, even when I listen to, the local talk radio station, when they come on the news section, at the top and bottom of the hour, they say, and again, it's, we've got record terrible sickness going on. The hospitals are full. You will die unless you take the jab. And even if you do take the jab, you can't have your freedom back. You must still wear your mask, and you probably will die anyway. But don't worry, it's better to die with the jab than to die without the jab. As there was a recent news story. Gosh, I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but it was great. They had this quote from the doctor. It was a story about a vaccinated man who had died, and this was supposed to be a cautionary tale to say, hey, you don't think you can go out and just live a normal life just because you took the jab. This guy took the jab, and guess what? He ended up dead. And the quote from the doctor was, things could have been much worse if he hadn't been vaccinated. How could it be worse? He's dead. And he died of the virus. It's not like he died of something else. He died because he caught the virus and he got sick. And it killed him. And so as of right now, we're getting at both ends. We're getting the media telling us essentially that the vaccines are not doing a great thing. And actually, I think that the media is going, way too far and being more anti-vax, if you want to use that phraseology, than most of the vaccine skeptics, at least the people who I've been listening to, people who kind of agree with, who are in the same sort of position to where I am, to where I'm skeptical of it. But I mean, I don't think I don't think the situation's as bad as the media is making it out to be, to where the folks who have it essentially have no protection and they still have to live their lives in fear. But there was an interesting Fox News poll that came out in the last couple of days that showed that I think a higher percentage of vaccinated people are still reporting that they wear masks everywhere than the people who are unvaccinated. And what does that mean? It's the people who are unvaccinated largely refuse to live in fear, and the people who are vaccinated are much more afraid, which you would think it would be the inverse, but it's not true. Because the people who have bought into the fear-mongering over the last year and a half, it's been more than a year and a half now, I guess, they do everything that the media tells them to do, including to go and get the jab. And they continue to live in fear even after getting the jab because the media tells them they should still be afraid. Whereas the folks who refuse to live in fear are in fact just doing the opposite of whatever the media says. So the media says be afraid, get the jab. These folks refuse to be afraid, and they're not going to go get the jab. Whereas you would think, data-wise, I still think the most rational thing would be people who got, let's say, I think the J&J jab seems to be the safe, at least because I haven't heard terrible horror stories about it, and there doesn't seem to be anything like a toxic spike protein associated with the J&J one. I would think, hey, you got that vaccine, you didn't have a severe reaction in the first couple of days or the first couple of weeks. It's been a month since you got it. You're probably doing okay. Hey, if you catch the virus, you probably won't get it that bad. That seems like a pretty good thing. You could go about living your life normally. That would seem to make sense to me. But that is just not the psychology, the social psychology, or the individual psychology of this situation. And so that's just an example of how things just don't make sense anymore. And that can be really disheartening. So I guess what I want to get at today is, what is the light at the end of the tunnel? Because, for a while, I think there were a lot of folks, those of us who thought, hey, this virus hysteria, people way overreacted to it, considering, I've said for a long time, I was relieved once we found out, the more data we get about the virus, the less afraid I become. I was afraid when we didn't know very much. Back in January, when we were just hearing things out of China, and we were thinking, well, it sounds like all these people are dying in China, but China's way understating it. We can't trust Chinese data and all this stuff. And there was this sense of dread that, oh gee, when it comes over here, we're going to see how bad this really is. And lo and behold, it wasn't nearly as bad as a lot of us thought it was going to be. But all the folks who thought that it would be nothing, who thought, hey, it's just the flu, bro. I mean, that was a meme that, people like me or Mr. Mediocre or, Chris Martinson, used to tease people with back in January and February. But then come March, all these people are like, not only is it, no longer just the flu, it's smallpox and Ebola with the virality of the common cold. I mean, we used to sort of joke when it came to the gain of function, the early research into whether or not this was a gain of function, the result of gain of function research, and say, oh gee, this little section of the genome looks like it's from the AIDS virus. It seems like China engineered airborne AIDS as a joke. But your average virus hysteric today, I think, would probably think that the characterization of this virus as airborne AIDS is not too far off. Because there are so many people who do really think that this is a death sentence. And because of that, because these people have been kept ignorant, because they've been kept afraid, because they are still hiding under their beds, so many regimes across the world and so many little mini tyrants have been able to take control of the lives of ordinary people. Looking at what's going on in Australia and the way in which people accept it, and there was a very sad and pathetic thread, although informative, on Twitter put out by Gray Connell, who is an Australian guy on Twitter. I've followed him for many years, and I normally kind of like his takes because he's very pro-monarchist and kind of has a nostalgia for the 19th century that I share. But he was explaining how he keeps getting a lot of American friends asking him, oh, are you okay? I mean, what's going on is so terrible for you guys. I mean, don't you, your government has gone totalitarian. And he was saying, in Australia, we don't think of things that way because we respect authority. We love our regime. We always think that they have our best interests at heart. And so we thank the troops for their service when they take their jackboots and they stomp on our throats. When the police beat us with our billy clubs for leaving our apartment without a mask, we shout in ecstasy, "Harder, Daddy!" And that's just our Australian culture. When I read something like that, it's just so depressing and blackpilling, and it's like, people in this world, they really don't care. And so when I read stuff like that, it really does seem like this can go on forever. I mean, we think of the Russian people, as a culture, as being, pretty tough folks, tough people who you can't push around. Yet they were choked and suffered under the boot of the Soviet Union for 90 years? Not quite 90 years, I guess 70 years. And so, it's not really, it's not like we can have solace and just think, oh, well, gee, this kind of oppression can only happen to, weak subservient Chinese people or weak malnourished vegan Western European soy boys. It can happen here too, and it is happening across America. And there's an interesting analogy it's kind of tongue-in-cheek that was being pushed by Clay and Buck today. I guess some guy on Twitter said it, and they picked up on it. And that was sort of comparing Florida today to Stalingrad during World War II. The idea being that, just you have to hold the line at Florida because if Florida falls, then we all become Australia, was the basic point. And, as someone living in Florida who has felt so fortunate to be here, who I felt like I've been shielded by a lot of the madness. And, for many months ago, fairly early on, like last summer, I stopped talking about the virus entirely because it felt like it was over here. We had a month or two where restaurants were closed, And then after that, that was over, and we went back to living a normal life. And other than the restaurants being closed, I did live a normal life during that time. And it's just like at some point, enough has to be enough. Jimmy Dore, I remember a while back, during the lockdowns actually, he had, I know it sounds like I'm bouncing all over the place, but I'm trying to sort through my thoughts here. He had made an interesting point, and as a leftist, instinctually people on the left are anti-gun. And Jimmy had said, hey, this argument that, hey, it's good that ordinary people have guns so that they can fight a tyrannical government when that comes, that seems like a good idea. And at some point he changed his position and said, you know what, I guess I like guns now. Well, then the lockdowns came, and a tyrannical government came in and took away people's freedoms. And people having guns did not change that. And Jimmy came on the show and he said, you know what? I was for guns for this specific reason, and I guess I'm anti-gun again. Because what good did it do it? People have guns, and they didn't fight against the tyrants. And I feel the same way. Though, as I don't expect gun owners to have risen up against what happened. It would have been too easy for the state to pick them off individually. There was no unified front. You need some kind of organization. And I think that organization could come in the form of local governments, of local states. And that, we have to organize at those levels. Try and get your local sheriff on your side, your local county commission, your school board, and a lot of people are having trouble with that, and then ultimately your state government. And at any of those levels, you try and mount a political defense of your rights that way and say, you know what, no, we're not going to obey the higher authority. We're not going to obey the state or the federal government, whoever it is that is sanctioning this tyranny. And in some parts of the country, in a limited sense, they have done that. There have been individual sheriff's departments who have said, we're not going to enforce this stuff. We're not going to go along with it. The sheriff of LA County has given some limited pushback from what I understand. But despite all that, it just hasn't been enough. It doesn't feel like things are getting any better. It feels like now things are worse than they've ever been, or at least worse than they've been in the last year. I feel like we've gone all the way back to like April of 2020. And meanwhile, while this is going on, the Great Reset marches on, no doubt using the virus as a wonderful excuse. Take from that what you will. We've got this infrastructure bill, which all of these omnibus or infrastructure bills or whatever these giant multi-trillion-dollar bills are out of Washington, there's always incredible erosions of civil liberties within them, total reorganizations of the economy. It seems pretty clear now that corporate America and the Western neoliberal establishment has zeroed in on the year 2030 for just getting rid of gas cars. And what once was a major segment of American culture in the post-war era just being erased, and nobody cares. I mean, this is the kind of thing, if anything, you would think that Americans, no matter what their political point of view, would stand up for car culture and for their, for something so basic and so apolitical. I mean, especially in the same year in which friggin' Bezos goes up in his silly little rocket and in his one rocket trip, emits more carbon. If you believe carbon is such this terrible, evil boogeyman thing that we must limit. So much so that we have to take away the cars of ordinary Americans and people across the world. Bezos emitted more carbon probably in that one trip than any American would in their entire lifetime, even if they drove a 1970 Hemi Challenger, which nothing really was going to emit more than that. I mean, that was you probably could light a match at the tailpipe of one of those cars and shoot out flames. And for so long, really, I guess going back 5 or 6 years now, I've been I wouldn't say blackpilled, but I've realized that the United States as an institution was at the end of its rope, and there was no reforming it. And it's funny. Glenn Beck, of all people, is finally at the stage of saying, hey, it's not about saving our country anymore. That was one of the rallying cries, of conservatism. That's in general in America. It's always, hey, we have to save America. America's going to be destroyed. Next election, if we lose this election, America's over. And they always say that, and then it never happens. Well, Glenn Beck is finally acknowledging, hey, you know what? This whole thing about America, we've been trying to save our society, our e pluribus unum, that's gone. It's been gone for a long time. There is no one America anymore. We have no unity. We are not a common people. We don't have anything in common with these folks, and it's a tremendous growth that somebody like that is acknowledging this, because that's the thing. We cannot move forward until we acknowledge that the past is gone. That's something that occurred to me, a few years ago, around the time of 2016. It wasn't, directly because of Trump. I'm not one of these people who's, whole, whether you're left or right, if you're, these partisans who their entire identity politically revolves around Trump. Trump is the sun in their heliocentric model of politics. Rather, I'm one of the people who recognized at the time that Trump was a product of this existing divide. What really woke me up was the Confederate flag thing. That original, going back to 2015, that original controversy over the Confederate flag getting ripped down off of everything. That was something that just, because within my lifetime, the Confederate flag was a apolitical, non-controversial symbol of Southern culture. So much so that Howard Dean in 2004, in a speech said, I want to be the candidate of the guy with the Confederate flag bumper sticker. And nobody was offended by that, because that was just, hey, he's just talking about a redneck. That's all he means. Seeing how quickly these things could shift and how people would act like, oh, no, we've all been, half of the country, or everyone has been against this forever. That kind of, the dissonance there of that particular issue just really woke me up and made me realize this is not at all the country I thought it was. It's not the country that I lived in, that I was born in, and I was in my teens at that point. And so I realized that the only way for things to get better was that at first they had to get worse. It's something I've maintained since as long as this channel's been around. I've maintained things will get worse before they get better. But I thought that, what I was looking to see was economically they get worse, and that when the economic strain comes, that will exacerbate the cultural divide, and the cultural divide will prevent the political regime from being able to function and to recover from the economic hardship. And that great economic pain, even though what we're going through now is not great, with all this, relatively high inflation, it's not as bad as it has to get, in my opinion, for things to start coming apart, for things to start getting better. We have to hit rock bottom first. And the worst thing is that we just keep muddling through and continue a slow decline, a steady decline. I want to see a sharp decline so that we can get back on the road to recovery and rebuilding some kind of society, whatever that looks like, with or without whatever percentage of the country. I don't care. I just want where I live to function properly and to not have to suffer under the edicts of petty tyrants wherever they may hail from. But I must say, on the bright side, there's no place in the world I'd rather be right now than Florida. I really do feel like this is the center of the resistance against all of this madness. I don't know how successful we will be, but it seems like for the sake of his own political future, DeSantis has decided to make himself the leader of the opposition to everything associated with this virus. And that, I think, will push him to really differentiate himself from everything else, or at least a lot of the rest of the Western neoliberal agenda. And unfortunately, his ultimate aspirations clearly is to become president of the United States, of all 50 United States. Whereas my goal is to see this union of states cleaved at the very least in half, but preferably into as many pieces as possible. Honestly, I would be happy if all, however many thousands of counties, over 1,000 certainly counties in the United States, were to be completely autonomous. I would be very happy with that. I think that society would function much better, something along the lines of the Holy Roman Empire. But even though DeSantis has unitary ambitions, perhaps his radically different agenda, again, relative to the insanity of mainstream Western neoliberal consensus as of right now, which is constantly evolving, by the way. I think that Western liberalism bears no resemblance to what Western liberalism was founded upon. I mean, it's just a name at this point. It's the blob. It's the World Economic Forum. It's power. And I think that these folks are spiraling, clearly. They don't know what they want. They don't know what they're after, at least from day to day, I should say logically. They know what they want, but they can't come right out and say it, at least not yet. We're not at the stage where Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Boris Johnson can themselves come out and say, you will own nothing and you will be happy by 2030. But perhaps in the American context, when you will own nothing and you will be happy, butts up against the return to normalcy, which DeSantis has tried to make his platform. Perhaps that will generate enough heat. Perhaps that will be a strong enough tension to snap the United States. I mean, I certainly felt that under the Trump administration, the level of division and tension that was created by his existence in Washington, even though I did not like, if you ask me, oh, was Trump a good president? No, he was a terrible president. But on net, what his effect was relative to what it would have been under Hillary Clinton, Hillary Clinton was muddling through, just continuing go along to get along, whereas Trump created a lot of problems, and those were problems which the system was unable to solve and reconcile. And we need more and more issues like that until the system is finally pushed to the brink. We just need somebody to push it over the edge, and Trump did that quite a bit. Unfortunately, we had this pandemic thing that came in and was a great excuse for the elite to come in and reassert a lot of control that they felt they were losing while Trump was in office. And a lot of that is not just literal control over institutions, because they didn't lose that. They had control over institutions. What they were losing was control over people's minds. And so if we see a second wave of Trumpism, perhaps that will be enough, or at least, at the very least, it will push the system closer to the brink of collapse. And maybe a pure political collapse is the best we can hope for, because I do not. We're in totally uncharted waters as far as the economy goes, and I just don't know how long the Fed will be able to keep up this charade, and how long the current bubble will just continue to again muddle through. Because what I've been banking on was that, when this current economic cycle comes to an end, when this bubble bursts, I know that the institutions are too weak to absorb the shock, and that I think that would be a knockout blow. But if that blow doesn't come, if it never comes, then the politics themselves, organically, must deteriorate to such an extent that the system comes apart anyway, even with a nominally stable economic climate. So I'm not really sure where to end this off today, but I just wanted to think through a lot of stuff that's been bothering me. And I appreciate if you were listening. Go ahead and, I guess, leave a comment of any reactions you might have, or things that have been bothering you, things that you wanted to get out, generally about things that are keeping you down, that are making you feel down about the current situation. Because I really am looking for some kind of hope here, for some kind of way forward. What is there left to hope for? So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.